Hello everyone, it's your bud. In today's video, I will be discussing the idea of running a D&D or Dungeons & Dragons game in a Mad Max post-apocalypse with different classes for different driving or supporting roles. Initially, this was based upon the idea of a knight in shining armor and his steed, and I wondered about the equivalent in Mad Max. Then with the rest of Mad Max, with the road warrior being a lawman, the shrine to V8 as a paladin, the blood bags as clerics, and the war rig, dirt bikes, spike cars, monster trucks, and so much more that makes Mad Max awesome, I wanted to see what else I could think up. So this video is just an introduction to the topic, as I only started to think of it last night. If any of you have seen Into the Badlands, then you can imagine the power that comes with a little bit of mechanical engineering in a world without. Same with Mad Max. And if you hear any noises in the background, my neighbor seems to be doing some work, so sorry about that, let's continue on. The feudal structures that form make for an interesting D&D world with campaigns and quests and all. Although this would not be D&D, this would be ENW, or Engines and Wagons. Or maybe the wagon has an E instead of an O, so then it'd be Wagons, then you could have E and E. I don't know, E and E instead of D&D. So the reason I'm making this video is partially to hear your ideas down below, including names, classes, locations, and all that. I've only covered the 12 basic classes, so if you have any cool ideas, then let me know down below. If you want to help create a cool post-apocalyptic world, then feel free to let me know what you would add or change down below. Now I have a few classes, the first 12 done already, including the version of the Barbarian, the Carbarian, who has the most basic of vehicles that get themselves from point A to point B. Probably just a truck. I think of the Toyota Hilux from Top Gear. That's probably a good Carbarian car. There are bards of the car world known as the tuners, who compile manifolds and exhaust to create exquisite roaring and bellowing of their engines. A good tuner can make your nomad group into a tough, brutal sounding mixture of steel and bass. Then, just for fun, I put in the Druids, or cyclists. I thought it would be hilarious to have an engine-hating Greenpeace-inspired cyclists and people-powered machines, casting off the shackles of oil and gas for the unlimited and never-ending, well, not necessarily unlimited never-ending power, but renewable power of the human body. Whether hand gliding, cycling on roads or mountain paths, skating on ice, or swimming in the water, these druids can reach areas that no car has ever seen. So yeah, the druids are people that don't like engines or oils. I thought that'd be kind of interesting to have druids in here. Or an alternative for the druids could be that each type of druid is sort of a druid of each location, or you could say a water druid might be a boat, or an air druid might be a plane, but perhaps there might be desert druids or jungle druids, or, you know, whenever you adapt something to a certain location, or whenever you live in a certain location, perhaps the druids are ones that who have modified their vehicles to inhabit a certain location. Like think of someone that would use maybe jet skis or something in a swamp. That could be a kind of druid or something like that. So the druids could be people that just completely deny anything to do with engines, or they could be people that use them but in the best way for this scenario or location they're in. For example, a swamp druid might use a jet ski, or a desert druid might have something completely different than an Arctic druid. But then maybe the water druids are boat people and sky druids or something are plane people, I don't know. So that's just another thing to think about. The most basic of the classes is the driver, the replacement for the fighter. Think of Baby Driver, and you have a good idea of a driver. Give them a wheel and a gas pedal, and they will go to work. Dependable, quick reacting, and ever keen on the next race that they can try to win, or the next car they can outdrive on the wastelands. Next is the actual inspiration for this whole video. It's just a pretty funny pun that leads to interesting classes. The monk is now known as the monkanic, who knows just the right location to cause the most brutal and crippling damage, and who can feel the vibration of the engine and know just what piece to move out of place to cause a cascading failure throughout. Using wheel spin to spray mud and sand, or adding a little bit of sand into your engine, or then having quick, aggressive pit maneuvers to end your escape. That's how the monkanic fights. Now, the paladins of the carpocalypse are those who have faith in the engines. They're known as revs, which could be short for reverend or also just for the engine rev sound. I thought that was pretty fitting. They prefer large trucks to house their shrine to V8 or whichever god they worship, and orders of revs travel the land together or send lone revs to towns or settlements or nomad groups to both protect and recruit into their holy revs. It is the revs who carry the cargo, so it is the revs who pray for the safety during delivery, which is the reason for their fierce protection of their individual rev groups and teachings. So yeah, since they had to transport everything, they eventually came up with this sort of culture of like, I mean, think about it. If you were traveling from one end of a post-apocalypse to another and your cargo didn't fall apart, you'd probably think, well, that was lucky, and then a superstition might form. And then that superstition might form into more and more, and that's how the revs came about. Truckers with sort of religion. Trucker religious groups, I don't know. That's kind of the revs. Now, the rangers and rogues I have kept the same, as both of these two names sound like the appropriate post-apocalypse terminology anyways, and suit the Mad Max world. One would be full of bikers and dune buggies and long-distance travels, being the rangers, while the others would be more dangerous and close, and much more capable of getting there using nos, terrain, and clever designing of their vehicles to make custom purpose-built ambush or strike cars. Think of the buzzards from Mad Max. And the last three classes here are also pretty poor so far, so feel free to change or leave any suggestions down below. I'm curious to see what you can come up with. They are sorcerer or sportcerer, warlock or wheellock, which is a drifter class, or wizard or whizz car. So I thought having a drifter class for the warlocks seemed pretty appropriate, but I'm not sure exactly what purpose they could serve. I just think it's cool to have a drifting class in the post-apocalypse, even if it's not practical. So yeah, the wheellock or the warlock are the drifters. The sportcerer is just so the name works. I thought wizard might be the fastest cars out there, so the best racers ever are maybe the wizards, and sorcerers might be the second fastest, sportcerers, meaning supercars are whiz cars or wizards, and sports cars are sportcerers. So the only difference between them is the speed they can achieve. Wheellock drifts, sportcerer is second fastest, and whiz car is the fastest. So what class would you pick? If this was a video game and you had to pick your character, you'd actually be picking your class and your car. So let me know what class and what car you would pick down below. And how would you mod it for the Wasteland? I don't know if you've ever played the game Crossout, but that's kind of the world I imagine. A world of kings, queens, and knights. Only the knights use cars and wear racing suits, and the kings are like a Morton Joe. So I've been watching a lot of Top Gear lately, and I've been thinking a lot about Mad Max. If you don't watch Top Gear, I highly suggest it. And of course, I can recommend Mad Max as well. The newer one is best by far in my mind. In Top Gear, they often modify their cars or get specific cars for their challenges. They modify and create amphibious cars, they drive through deserts, the Arctic, jungles, rainforests, savannas, rain, snow, sleet, up volcanoes, again over water, lakes, rivers, and oceans, and every conceivable situation you can imagine a car or not imagine a car in, Top Gear's done it. They've done it all, and I always love imagining how I would solve the challenges that they take. So this was inevitable. Why not play Dungeons & Dragons with cars instead of magic? The survivalism and maintenance of cars fit perfectly where the weapons and magic systems would in D&D. So what class would you play? The Barbarian or Carbarian? The Bard or Tuner? The Cleric known as the Patcher, which I'm realizing I did not write in there. So yes, there's a Cleric known as the Patcher. So yeah, the Cleric is just I had Mechanic as monkanic, so I guess Cleric had to be like someone who would just patch things up. So the Cleric could be like, think of the people who had the blood bags. So the Cleric I have as Patcher. I don't know why. You can just change that name. I'm not too happy with that one. If you can think up of a cool car-sounding cleric name, just sort of like what they did with Mad Max, they had people using blood bags and someone had to be in charge of people's health. So think of the cleric as being in charge of the health as well as part of the cars. So I think the clerics or patchers would be just as good fixing up the cars as they would fixing up the people. Although, yeah, I'll leave that for later. So yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that one. You could also be a druid or a cyclist, which remember is the people that use people power, renewable energy, renewable resources. That would be a druid. You could be a fighter or a driver, a monk or a monkanic. The paladins are known as the revs. Then there's the ranger, the rogue, which I didn't change at all, The sorcerer is the sportcerer. The warlock is the wheellock, which is the drifter class. And then there's the wizard, which is the whizz car, which are the fastest classes there is out there. I'd also like to touch on the world and just mention the difference of being in a town versus outside of a town. So this entire world built on cars and things like that, think of Into the Badlands for the location. However, this is all dependent on one thing: roads. So inside of a town or a city or whatever type of place there would be better roads, and then faster cars could exist in there. While outside, you'd need something more like a dirt bike or something to travel. So think of this whole thing comes down the entire world, the entire story, all of the difficulty, all of the problems, everything comes to do with whether you're on a road or off a road. So think of roads and think of that being basically just everything. So roads are everything in this world. Roads are everything. The best roads would have the best traffic, which would then have the most people, which would then have the most lords or kings or knights in cars or whatever, the most civilization. So think about roads. That's a very important thing. I just wanted to add that in. So we've discussed the classes, and I just wanted to mention the world. So for the world, think about the difference between a supercar in a city that has the fortifications and the manpower versus an off-road car outside. You could run pretty quick on a dirt bike outside, but then you'd be nothing in a city. So the police force in a city could not chase a motorbike outside the city, though. You see how there's differences? So this all comes down, I think it'd be really interesting, the personalization and the numbers of stories that you could have here. I mean, it's just real life, right? So think about the cars in all locations or different vehicles for different locations. So I just wanted to mention the world. I hope that you like that. So roads are everything in this world. Roads are everything. So I have been focusing a lot on cars. In fact, most of the classes have to do with cars, but really this all has to do with engines and wagons. So it's engines and roads, or I guess not necessarily roads, because there's lots of different environments. There's snow, there's sand, there's the ocean, there's the air. So there's lots of different places where engines can take you in this world. And then, yeah, think of it very much like the Badlands or like a Death Race or something like that, or Mad Max, where you're just making the most crazy thing. It could be for a purpose, and it could be as part of a group of nomads, or even a part of a settlement or a city, or even something bigger than that, part of a nation. Or it could just be a single purpose-built vehicle for a single thing, maybe flying, maybe on the water, maybe on the desert, on the sands, something like a dune buggy. Or it could be a all-around car that one person has to have for their whole life that gets passed down generation after generation. What would a generational vehicle look like? Would it be like just added on to bit after bit, eventually turning into these monstrous creations, or maybe some sort of cherished vehicle that's kept in clean condition or something like that? So yes, these vehicles can be anything from just a simple thing to get you from point A to point B, like a carbarian would use, or some sort of just cool vehicle that one of the drivers, and that's the fighter class, that one of the drivers would use. You could just be like a druid and have some bicycle or something, just a mountain bike. A mountain bike could be a druid or something like that. There's plenty of different places in this world for plenty of different vehicles to be used. Focus heavily on cars and drivers, but yes, this can do with any type of vehicle, from a jet ski to, now there's these vehicles, I'm not exactly sure what they're called. You can have an engine behind it and then like a big fan behind it with like a parasail above it, and you can fly in the air with like a big, I don't know, it's sort of like those things that go through the swamps or whatever that have those big fans in the back. Or there'd be hovercrafts or something. A hovercraft could fit into this world if you could make it. But yeah, this has inspired a lot. I've been watching a lot of Top Gear, and they have those great challenges where they have to adapt a vehicle that should not be suited to an environment to somehow make it through a jungle like they did in Bolivia or the Arctic. They went to the North Pole in the Arctic. They've traveled through deserts to find the source of the Nile, so many different things. And then I was thinking a bit about Crossout. If you've ever played the game Crossout, it's great. You just like make the most crazy creations, have the most, like everything's just like, it's like a James Bond car where you just have the most guns and you battle and you have arenas. And I thought like, well, if knights battled in the arenas of war in fantasy sort of Dungeons and Dragons, then you could have a sort of demolition derby in this sort of thing. I think a demolition derby would be a really interesting way to settle matters, and you could have like a demolition derby champion of a certain nation and something like that. But in this world, I guess a baron would have a demolition derby expert or something sort of working for them. That could be something that somebody could do. Or what about a mailman? Sort of think about like a delivery system. What would any of the delivery people look like? What type of vehicles would they use? It's very much the equivalent of a knight in armor. If you were in a town in medieval times and a knight in armor suddenly rode from one side of the town to the other and showed up on a horse in shining armor, you'd just be like, how did you get here so fast? How was that possible? Well, in a well-maintained town or settlement or city or nation, you could have supercars that could travel from one end to the other. So think of the cars as a vehicle or a steed, but it doesn't have to be a car. Remember, it can be something on the water or something in the air as well. So I do like the idea of also having the druids be people that like would use a dog sled or a paraglider or a wingsuit or something like that. Like I do like that idea of druid as well. Or maybe a druid is someone who can adapt their vehicle to a certain terrain. So like a swamp druid could adapt some sort of thing to not get like clogged up and to be able to go through all of the mud. There's lots of options here, but I do like the idea of having the power of cars being the group and the location. For example, a motorcycle that's on pavement in a city is super fast. It can be super quick. You can be like a Kira with a motorcycle gang just going back and forth. But if you're backed into a corner, if a whole bunch of like large police SUVs back you down, then that's it. You're pretty much stuck. So I think it's very much like Dungeons and Dragons. If you could have different vehicles being different representations, the tank is sort of a tanker. You can have a healer being someone that is an engineer, and then yeah, the DPS could just be like the driver pretty much. So yeah, like imagine a rogue on a motorcycle just sort of zipping by, zipping through, going underneath sort of places they shouldn't. The revs, what would the revs be like? I really like Mad Max, how in depth they went into Mad Max, and I really like how they're like praying to V8 and all of this, because your vehicle is life outside the city, whereas inside the city you can have the whizz cars, the wizards or whatever. Imagine someone that's been out in the fields or something far away from civilization seeing a supercar for the first time. It would be like seeing a high mage sponsored wizard or something like that in Dungeons and Dragons. So yeah, there's so many endless similarities between Dungeons and Dragons and engines and wagons. So thanks for watching, everyone. That's it for today. I need to catch up on some sleep now, so I'm gonna go watch some Top Gear and have some laughs, and then I'll see you tomorrow. So leave this video a like if you want some more custom D&D worlds, or if you want more car videos. Subscribe for daily videos. I make at least one video every single day, and have almost 20 playlists of hundreds of videos from sci-fi to fantasy and everything in between. So go check them out. Leave any questions or suggestions in the comments below. Tell me what class and what car you'd pick. If I had to pick any car, I would probably pick between, I have three favorites here. The 68 Thunderbird, I really like. The 76 Corvette, I also really like, but my favorite at this current time is the 2019 DBS Superleggera. That's my favorite car. So if I had to pick any car, that would be it. Now let's see, what class would I pick? Maybe the tuner for the Bard. I think that could be kind of interesting. That kind of fits the DBS Superleggera. Probably a ranger though. If I had to pick any class, I'd probably pick a ranger, and I'd probably pick the DBS Superleggera. That's what I do. So yeah, tell me what class and what car would be your favorite and how you'd modify it down below. Thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Have a great day.